How did the first humans survive? This is a question that has plagued researchers for centuries. The truth is that our ancestors had to endure an extremely hostile world. They were attacked by giant predatory animals, fought for resources with other primates, and had to deal with volcanic eruptions, massive floods, and deadly diseases. But somehow, they managed to not only survive, but thrive. In this video, we'll take a look at how the first humans survived in a savage world. Let's start with one of the biggest challenges our ancestors faced: the weather. When the first humans appeared on the scene, it was a wild world out there. Volcanoes erupted frequently, causing massive climate shifts that could wipe out entire species. Floods were also common, which caused even more devastation. The Earth's temperature fluctuated wildly, swinging from extreme heat to extreme cold. This created a very harsh environment for early humans who had no technology to help them survive. They were forced to be nomadic, constantly searching for food and shelter. But despite all these challenges, they managed to survive and eventually thrive. One reason for their success was their adaptability. Early humans were able to adjust to changing climates and environments, which allowed them to survive in a variety of habitats. They were also able to develop new technologies and tools, which helped them to find food and protect themselves from predators. Additionally, early humans were social creatures who lived in groups. This gave them the ability to cooperate and share resources, which increased their chances of survival. Finally, early humans were also very resilient. They were able to recover from setbacks and adapt to new circumstances, which allowed them to overcome the many challenges they faced. All of these factors contributed to the survival and eventual success of the first humans. Another major challenge early humans faced was the competition for resources. Early humans were not the only species vying for food, water, and shelter. They had to compete with other primates, including chimpanzees and gorillas, as well as with large predatory animals such as lions and tigers. To make matters worse, natural disasters such as floods and droughts often caused resource scarcity, which led to increased competition. This competition was particularly intense for food, since early humans had not yet developed the ability to farm or domesticate animals. They had to rely on hunting and gathering, which was a risky way to obtain sustenance. Early humans were often at the mercy of the elements and could not control the availability of food. If the weather was bad, plants would not grow and animals would be scarce, which meant that early humans would have to go hungry. In addition, they were constantly on the move, since they had to follow animal migrations and the growth of plants in order to find food. This made it difficult to build permanent settlements or store food for the future. Early humans also had to deal with the threat of extinction. They were a relatively new species and were vulnerable to random events, such as a meteor impact or a volcanic eruption that could wipe them out. This danger was a constant reminder that their survival was not guaranteed, and they had to be prepared for anything. Overall, the competition for resources was a major challenge for the first humans. They had to compete with other species for food, water, and shelter, and deal with the threat of extinction. But they were able to adapt and survive, which allowed them to eventually become the dominant species on Earth. Early humans also had to contend with disease. This is because they lived in close contact with other animals, which allowed diseases to spread icily from one species to another. For example, humans are thought to have contracted HIV from chimpanzees and Ebola from fruit bats. In addition, early humans were exposed to a wide variety of bacteria and parasites through their contact with the soil and water. These pathogens could cause a range of illnesses, from mild fevers to deadly infections. Early humans had no knowledge of hygiene or how to prevent the spread of disease. This made it difficult to control outbreaks once they started. Additionally, they had no access to modern medicine, which could have been used to treat or even cure some of these diseases. Despite these challenges, early humans developed some ways to cope with disease. For example, they learned to avoid contact with sick individuals, which helped to limit the spread of infection. They also developed some herbal remedies that could alleviate symptoms or even cure certain ailments. However, these measures were not always effective, and disease continued to be a major threat to early human populations. Overall, disease was a major challenge for the first humans. They were exposed to a wide variety of pathogens which could cause illness or even death. They had no knowledge of hygiene or how to prevent the spread of disease, and no access to modern medicine. Despite these challenges, they developed some ways to cope with disease, but these measures were not always effective. Early humans were also confronted with a hostile environment. They lived in a world full of predators that were larger, stronger, and more agile than they were. In addition, they had to contend with extreme weather conditions that could quickly turn deadly. For example, early humans had to deal with scorching heat waves, freezing cold temperatures, and torrential downpours. Moreover, they lived in a world without any of the conveniences or protections that we take for granted today. They had no roads, bridges, or buildings to protect them from the elements, and they had to constantly be on the lookout for dangerous animals and plants. Early humans also had to deal with the aftermath of natural disasters, such as floods, earthquakes, and volcanic eruptions. These events could cause widespread destruction, leaving early humans without food, water, or shelter. Furthermore, they had to contend with the changing seasons, which brought their own set of challenges. In the winter, they had to find ways to stay warm and find food when supplies were low. Early humans also had to deal with the threat of starvation. They had to constantly be on the lookout for food and had to be willing to travel long distances in search of sustenance. If they failed to find food, they could quickly become malnourished and even starve to death. All of these challenges made early human life extremely difficult. They had to be strong, resourceful, and resilient to survive in such a hostile environment. So, how did the first humans survive in a savage world? As we have seen, they faced many challenges, from the weather to predators to starvation. However, they were able to adapt and overcome these obstacles through their intelligence, resourcefulness, and resilience. Early humans were able to use their intelligence to develop new technologies and tools, which helped them to find food and protect themselves from predators. They were also very resourceful and were able to make the most of the limited resources available to them. Finally, early humans were incredibly resilient and were able to bounce back from setbacks and keep moving forward. All of these traits allowed the first humans to not only survive in a savage world, but to thrive and eventually become the dominant species on Earth. If you liked this video, please leave us a like and a comment. Also, check out our other videos about early humans. We have a whole playlist dedicated to the fascinating world of our ancestors. Thanks for watching.